just trying to make sure everything is okay. I think we're here. All right. It said my internet connection was not strong. And I was like, girl, the rent is too high. The bills are too high. All right. Good morning. It is the last day of July. I cannot freaking believe it. I hope you guys have had an incredible summer. I think, and this is like a real blessing, like as I get older, my life gets better and it gets more fun. Like you grow up and you're in school, so you're always looking forward to the summertime because you think it's just going to be the best time and the most fun. And I'm a sun girl, I'm a sun goddess. And like, you're like, oh, it's not going to be like this, you know? Like, I used to think, like, when I was in my 30s, I was going to be dead. And the fact that as my age increases, the amount that I can and do enjoy my life is also on the incline is an incredible gift. Thank you guys for joining me. I am going to be honest, for the people who are watching this on replay, just skip past this little mushy section. I was supposed to come on here last night and I didn't because I broke my nail and I was ashamed. I was ashamed. But I said, Kim, what would Beyonce do? I said, Kim, what would Beyonce do? She wouldn't hide because her nail was broken. But that really was it. I was like, oh girl, it's too raggedy. Um, and the next thing I have to say, I have such enormous gratitude for you guys. I want to start thanking the super chatters and the super thankers. So, super thanks are after the videos have been posted or after streamed, people who give the little tips or whatever, and the super chatters give it during the stream. I am so bad at acknowledging those people because I'm easily distracted. Hashtag ADHD. But I do want to make sure that I am acknowledging people when it happens. So shout out to y'all. I am so cognizant of the fact that this is the only time in history where I would be able to do this and this way and live this kind of life. Like I truly am so thankful that I have complete control over my time. I can talk about whatever I want to talk about. I don't worry about getting dragged on the internet by somebody yelling at me from the front seat of his car, right? Like I don't worry about sorry, I can't help it. I can't help myself. Like a communications professional told me not to acknowledge it, but I can't help it. Um I I just know that this is an incredible gift, and so much of the miracles of our lives are determined by accidents of our birth. And if I was born in 1969 or 1959 instead of 1989, this would not be a thing. I would have to have a real job, or God forbid, I would have to work in academia or something like that. So, um, it's really, really great. It's really, really great. All right. So we're gonna start off by a little bit on Sonya Massey, and then we are going to get into Kamala Harris and her big rally last night. We are going to talk about my concerns for Kamala moving forward, but also some bright spots that we're seeing in the new polling, the new data that is coming out around the campaign. And we will end on how this might be changing the electoral map and how Trump might respond to that. Okay. 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 I'm going to start with Sonya Massey. I want to say that in the future, I do plan on sharing some long form thoughts about Sonya Massey. I cannot do that in this video because, as you may know, my general feelings toward policing and prosecution are so overwhelmingly negative that it would drown out everything that I'm going to say about Kamala Harris and her campaign. um, and I thought that for the next 90 something days that I would be able to effectively suppress my overwhelmingly negative orientation toward America's institutions of policing and prosecution. I thought I could be fake about it. I can't. I can't. And the Sonya Massey killing, because technically murder is adjudicated by our criminal legal system, has underscored why I can't be fake about it. But in addition to Sonya Massey, the catastrophe that has happened in Missouri with Lamar Johnson has also affirmed for me that my horrible feelings about the United States' institutions of policing and prosecution are mostly correct. Now, that being said, I do think that it is important for Kamala Harris to win this election. So I will be very honest about my overwhelmingly and honestly insurmountably negative feelings towards policing and prosecution. But I will also really clearly outline why I believe it's important for Kamala Harris to win this election. But I am not going to lie and say that I do not have serious issues with the fact that people can participate in America's institutions of policing and prosecution and participate in the effective ruination of many people's lives and then come back and say, oh, I was just doing my job. It will never sit right with me. It will never sit right with me. Never. All right. Now we have to talk about Kamala. So I am so every day I wake up and I am so glad that the Democratic Party establishment, the higher ups, the people with the real power, aka Nancy Pelosi, that they got together to push Joe Biden out of this race. It was just, I am just so grateful that I was on the side of Nancy Pelosi. Because you don't want to be on the other side of Nancy Pelosi. Okay. Um, it has immediately transformed this race in more ways than one. I wanted to go back and show y'all video of the point at which my mind changed about whether or not it was the smartest thing or the most astute thing to push for Kamala in this race, and it was at Essence Fest.
You know, we have said it every 4 years, but this here one is it. We are looking at an election that will take place in 122 days.
122.
Where on one side, you have the former president who is running to become president again, who has openly talked about his admiration of dictators and his intention to be a dictator on day one, who has openly talked about his intention to weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies, who has talked about being proud of taking from the women of America a most fundamental right to make decisions about your own body. And then last week, understand, sadly, the press has not been covering it as much as they should in proportion to the seriousness of what just happened, when the United States Supreme Court essentially told this individual who has been convicted of 34 felonies that he will be immune from essentially the activity he has told us he is prepared to engage in if he gets back into the White House. Understand what we all know. In 122 days, we each have the power to decide what kind of country we want to live in.
That was something. Again, that was when I was like, no, wait a second. Hey, where did this person come from? Because I've seen the other person for years. I've seen the other person for years, with the exception of when she was really in prosecutor mode, particularly needling Jeff Sessions, needling Brett Kavanaugh. But that person, I said, oh, okay, that person might be able to do it. And I think it's really important that we never minimize the importance of communication in both a candidate's electability, but also in a president's ability to govern. We are emotionally driven. We want to like to see and hear our elected officials. I mean, there's a reason why people keep tapping Josh Shapiro. They keep, mentioning him, Josh Shapiro, even though, again, we don't need a double prosecutor ticket. Please, no. Please, no. A Zionist double prosecutor ticket? No, no, no. Now, I would still vote for Harris Shapiro. I would. But come on now. Come on. But Josh Shapiro is a great speaker. He is. Sometimes I be watching Josh Shapiro and I'm like, nah, it's giving a little black preacher, a little bit. Because, like black preachers are historically the most enthralling and charismatic preachers that the world has ever seen. But the most enthralling and charismatic speakers that the world has ever seen. But, that's a conversation for a different day. But really interesting to listen to. People like Gretchen Whitmer, because she is an incredible speaker. She has given a couple of long form interviews, podcast interviews to the New York Times. She gave one that was published yesterday or the day before on the Ezra Klein show that I thought was really spectacular. Pete Buttigieg is everywhere right now. I don't know what Pete Buttigieg is trying to do, but Pete is everywhere right now in his capacity as a private citizen, not as the secretary of the Department of Transportation. But he is great at communication. And so the fact that Harris has overcome mostly the communication gap, overcome those issues, if this is not just a phase, if she can carry that out for the next 97 days or whatever, I, I totally believe in it. I totally believe in Harris for president. She has gotten so much better at delivering those punchlines. Let's watch video from the 10,000 person rally last night in Atlanta.
So the momentum in this race is shifting. And there are signs that Donald Trump is feeling it. You may have noticed. So last week, you may have seen, he pulled out of the debate in September he had previously agreed to. So here's the thing. Here's the funny thing about that. So he won't debate, but he and his running mate sure seem to have a lot to say about me. And by the way, don't you find some of their stuff to just be plain weird? Well, Donald, I do hope you'll reconsider to meet me on the debate stage. Because as the saying goes, if you've got something to say, say it to my face.
that was so well executed, all of it. So the rally in Atlanta had thousands and thousands of 10,000 people there. Apparently, there was a huge line outside trying to get into the arena. Megan Thee Stallion performed, Quavo was there. It was a real event. And it is so striking to see the incredible difference between the crowds that show up for a Trump rally, just the composition, and the kinds of people who show up for a Kamala Harris. I talked in the last stream about how this is a liberal elite of me. Raggedy. Some of those people were looking behind JD Vance when he was on the stump. I said, "Oh, it's not because black people going even in the t-shirts, even in dress down. Black people going they're gonna have themselves together." But the visuals of that are so superb. And one of the reasons why I like to talk about aesthetics, why it just occupies so much space in my brain, is because the average person, particularly if they consider themselves to be thoughtful and educated, they think that they are too smart to be impacted psychologically or emotionally by aesthetics, by optics. You're not. You're not. You can't outsmart some of these things that automatically tick off in your brain when you see a beautifully composed image. Sorry, I hate to tell you. Sorry. I know. I know. So when we were emphasizing the reasons why it was important to move Biden to the side, and there are reports now that Joe Biden will be the opening speaker at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. But when we're emphasizing the importance of that, a part of that was the understanding that most people are not ideologically driven. I am an ideologue. Okay? Ever since I was a little baby girl, I said inequality is bad. I grew up going to church 4 times a week. I said hating gay people is bad. Hey, hey, 9-year-old radical in the Baptist church. I said, hey, what's your problem with gays? Doesn't make sense. Just from a young age, but most people are not that. Most people don't have that. Most people, their political orientation is about how they feel. It's vibes based. And seeing Joe Biden mumble and stumble for months on end was bad vibes. They don't want that. In addition, it does matter a lot that Kamala Harris has gotten much better about delivering those straight to camera punchlines, those really clippable moments in a vibes election, in a charisma off, in a vibes war. The ability to be memed, your access to virality, I do think is going to have a huge impact. Donald Trump is or was the king of those little clips and punchlines and whatever, and that's what draws a lot of people to him. And if Kamala Harris can consistently match that, I think that is really I think it's going to do her campaign a lot of good. She did get into some, policy things, eliminating overdraft fees, rent caps. She reiterates time and time again that she is voting for the middle class. Again, a lot of policy that we generally think of as being oriented towards college graduates and women. There's been lots of discussion about the growing gender gap in the United States. Ooh, I read something in from some reporting from the Wall Street Journal yesterday, or I read it yesterday. I think it came out maybe a couple of days before that, about how the under 30 electoral gender divide is so pronounced, and they went through the differences in in the orientation toward different issues between men and women under 30. I found that to be very striking. And one thing that really stood out to me was this huge gap between how men under 30 and women under 30 feel about Obamacare, whether or not they feel that the Affordable Care Act should be repealed and replaced. And it was fascinating that such a large percentage of men under 30 felt that way. And it it only makes sense if you again understand that people's relationship to politics and the vibes is more concrete than their relationship to policy. I guarantee you, nobody under 30 wants the Affordable Care Act to be like, you just don't. You couldn't. First of all, most of those people are on their parents' insurance anyway, right? Like, I mean, that's the crazy thing, right? Like, when you're polling people under 30 about the repeal of Obamacare, I know most of those people don't even know that the only reason why you have health insurance right now and you can be on your parents' insurance until you're 26 is because of the Affordable Care Act. Like, I guarantee you, nobody under 30 wants to go back to a time when you couldn't get insurance if you had depression. Like, you don't. Like, if you were a child with diabetes, like, you couldn't. But because we are so far away from that, like, I have close family members with chronic illnesses who literally could never leave their job, could never do what I do because they couldn't leave their good job because they would never be able to be insured. But they are saying in polling that the young men are saying in polling that they are opposed to Obamacare because they associate that with republicanism, they associate that with Trumpism, and they would rather be aligned in identity and political orientation with Trumpism than the feminized Democratic Party. Yeah. So it makes sense that Kamala Harris reiterates time and time again that she is fighting for the people. This is a people powered campaign, a people centered campaign, but she also underscores middle class, middle class, middle class, because we associate middle class, especially now, with did you graduate from college? Because the gender electoral divide is also, and maybe more importantly, the education electoral divide. Educated people generally now vote for the Democratic Party. There were some good concrete things that she outlined there. I keep it up, keep going. Right? I know I'm over here fretting about the court cases that are coming down the pike. I'm worried about the way that a Trump ran executive branch would issue horrible directives to federal agencies to subvert people's civil rights and to destroy the environment. Like, I am worried about Donald Trump's executive orders. Most people aren't. Most people just aren't. Even if you are pro Kamala, even if you're a Democrat, most people don't think about that the way that I do. And that is, it's fine. I accept it. I accept it. Let's go with the vibes. Go with the vibes. Oh, right. I know y'all already up and arguing at 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so things that I really liked. The visuals about that rally, the visual, everything around was so, baby. I am a liberal, because liberal really is just about your orientation toward government and rights. And I know liberal has become a bad word, but uh a liberal oriented, left leaning person because of my ideology, but also liberals just have better taste. Oh my, I'm sorry. The left side of the spectrum just has better taste. As a girl with taste, conservatives could never, they could never. The beauty of those images for a rally is crazy. That light blue, the cinematic feel of the photography of the filming of it, the different camera angles, the bouquet, meaning Kamala or the speaker clear and the background blur. I said, oh, the Hollywood liberals are tapped in. The Hollywood elites, they said, girl, we're not going to have you out here looking crazy. It was just so gorgeous. I just truly am blown away by that. Um, Moreover, there is something important to Kamala Harris's campaign, relatively last minute, being able to reach out to a Megan Thee Stallion or a Quavo, even though I'm not really gonna be a Quavo person, right? Like, until Quavo can explain to me what happened in that elevator, I can't be a Quavo person. Um, the importance of that is, again, the cultural relevance question. There is now an attempt to turn Kamala Harris into a movement. Anybody who had misgivings about Kamala Harris as a politician or a candidate, or misgivings about her political record, whatever that may be, um, those concerns can be backgrounded as long as the cultural piece and the movement piece gets pushed into the front. If we can all get in line with Kamala Harris as an idea, of this is the person who is going to stop Trump. And not only is this the person who is going to stop Trump, it matters that she is a woman of Black and Indian descent, and Donald Trump is racist, and he is sexist, and she is a prosecutor, and Donald Trump has flagrantly flouted the law for the last 50 years. It's the idea of it that people are tapping into. And the other reason why that's really good for Kamala is for all the criticisms about what we might call her ideological pliability, her malleability over the years. The good thing about not exactly being able to nail her down is you can project onto Kamala Harris whatever you want. In much the same way that the Trumpers project onto Trump whatever they want. If they want to feel like he's a a masculine, confident Christian soldier, they can project that onto him. If they want to feel like he is a defender of white men's rights and liberties and freedoms, they can project that onto him, because he is intellectually, honestly, ideologically an empty vessel. Kamala Harris is not intellectually an empty vessel. I don't think that dumb people, no matter what the freaking right wing wants to say, I don't think dumb people get to be district attorney. I don't think dumb people get to be elected attorney general. I don't believe that. Not if you're a freaking woman and you're freaking Black and Indian. It just is not. Please, let's not be for fucking real. But this debate about, okay, how do you nail Kamala? Do you nail her as a super liberal from San Francisco, or do you try to nail her down as all of these horrible things that you did while you're a prosecutor, or do you nail her as being too soft on corporations, or do you say, oh, when she got that $20 billion settlement from Wall Street, she's too high, right? Like, it's hard. it might be possible to attack her from the left and the right, but it's also, if you want to believe in Kamala Harris, you just say, hey, she did this thing that I agree with. If you are a law and order Hollywood moderate, you can say she was a prosecutor. I saw David Axelrod on a podcast say about a week ago, like, she was actually a pretty tough prosecutor. And I thought, oh, that's so funny. It's so funny because Axelrod is saying that because he is trying to appeal to the law and order moderates. And if you are more oriented toward where I am, you can say, but actually, she did all of these reforms and it was this, and this. And then actually, when she got into the Senate, she voted very progressively. And they're like, huh, well, maybe, it's not that bad. And so things, what does Sun Tzu say in The Art of War? You have to be able to turn your opponent's strength, their biggest strength, into a weakness. I think that for Republicans who are really apparently having some difficulty figuring out what exactly they want the messaging around Kamala Harris's political identity to be, they thought that that was going to be their biggest strength for the Kamala Harris movement. That's a huge advantage. I think it's going to be, it's really, really good for her. It's going to be good for her. And especially if she can keep winning the charisma war, keep winning the soundbite war, keep winning the meme war, turn Harris into a pop culture figure by aligning her with somebody like Megan Thee Stallion, especially with regard to Black America. I have said that Black, well, this is my thesis, right? So the reality is that the class stratification in Black America is increasing. The way that class stratification in the United States largely is increasing. The paths and progress of Black people in the United States, really, it's going this way. But the way that Black people of different education levels and classes come together is through pop culture. And we're going to see more Megan Thee Stallion like moments because despite all of the ideological differences, am I a progressive and you're conservative and you go to church and I don't go to church and whatever, and you hate trans people and I won't, like, there's still a coming together via the realm of not really mass media anymore, but mainstream popular culture and the stuff that goes viral via these social platforms. And so it's fascinating to see old ass, aka church ladies, of whom I know many. They're in my fam, right? I did an aka pageant, aunts, cousins, my sister, right? Those buttoned up conservative ass AK, right? Right next to the super liberal or super progressives sitting together bopping along to Megan Thee Stallion, because we can all say, hey, that Stallion song, that Stallion song, that's catchy. It wasn't so bad. It wasn't so bad. So anybody who had a real, issue with that, you're really missing it. You're missing it. Okay. Um, I don't. Being mad at Megan Thee Stallion. Come on now, please. We've got to get some business. Got to get some business. Now, beyond the spectacle stuff. Oh, and also, Black people. I do think Black people do spectacle better than most people, and I also think that that is a huge advantage for Kamala Harris. Okay, so what does that big rally yesterday, what is that telling us? How can we connect that to some of the data? I really appreciate when people say, Kim, I like to listen to you talk about politics because it's just not purely your opinions. It's not. It's not. My opinions are rooted in things. Let's look at some of the new positive data. This is from Bloomberg. Harris at the top of the ticket, paying off for Democrats so far, published July 30th. The lead is race tightens up. Democrats' historic switch at the top of the presidential ticket is achieving the party's goal of turning an election they seemed all but certain to lose into a competitive one. Okay. The vice president is ahead of the former president by 2 points in both Arizona and Nevada, and they are tied up in Georgia. Sunbelt battlegrounds Democrats had essentially written off with Biden on the ballot. The only states polled were where Harris trails Trump are Pennsylvania and North Carolina. Biden's exit is motivating key voting groups Democrats need to win in November. Some 54% of voters age 18 to 34, as well as 61% of those in Gen Z, said they were more likely to vote with Biden's decision to drop out. That also goes for 64% of Black voters and 57% of Hispanic voters. So, this is the data that they were mentioning. Biden out, Harris in makes a majority of the people in these groups that they have polled more likely to actually show up. And in an election that people generally believe will be a turnout election, that is such a big deal. So big. Okay, so when I saw that Bloomberg Morning Consult poll, and by the way, it's just one poll. What does Alan Lichtman say? He says polls are just a snapshot in time. You can't hang your hat on them. You can't start, counting your chickens before they hatch or planning your way to Washington D.C. for inauguration weekend. And by the way, a Kamala baby, a Kamala Harris inauguration weekend is going to be mania. It's going to be cra- insane. If that happens. I don't know. Um, as a Negro who loves Negroes, it's a movie is what it would be. But that's really good. And the reason why that is really good is, as I mentioned in my last stream, I think it's behind the paywall now. I did a stream after Kamala Harris's first rally, and I think she did a good job at that first rally. The overwhelming concern was the way that Harris at the top of the ticket puts Pennsylvania into play, because Joe Biden did really great with older white people. He did a great job in 2020 of pulling white men away from Trump and turning them into Biden voters. The question is, does Kamala Harris have the ability to do that? Uh, Probably not. I mean, just like probably not. So, if she doesn't have the ability to do that, what does she have the ability to do? She has the ability to turn out Black voters and energize young people, because young people hate Joe Biden because he's old and boring, but also because of Gaza. And that puts new states into play, like Bloomberg mentioned, Sunbelt, Nevada, Georgia, Arizona. That's a good thing. And if Kamala Harris wins, because I played around with this, there is a website called 270 to win, where you can make up the electoral map and try to figure out your way to 270 electoral votes. And if Kamala Harris wins Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, which I mean, that's going to be hard. Well, let's be honest, it's going to be really hard. But if she did the solid blue states and won Georgia, Nevada, Arizona. She only needs one blue wall state to win. If Pennsylvania is out, then she can get Michigan. If she gets Georgia, Nevada, or Georgia, Arizona, and then is also can flip a North Carolina because they also have a lot of black voters. That's I mean there are new pathways for Kamala Harris to win an election when you have an active and excited voter base that is not only white people excited and enthused about voting for Trump. Now, in that morning consult poll, which again, small poll, one poll, but morning consult, Bloomberg morning consult, they are reputable. People trust them. She was behind Trump in North Carolina, but that still feels doable. We had Roy Cooper, who is the current governor of North Carolina, come out recently and say that he is withdrawing himself from the vice presidential picking process. And if there can be a change in the polling in North Carolina, that is a huge thing. The other reason why that is huge is the Republican candidate for governor in North Carolina is a man named Mark Robinson. Mark Robinson is a disgrace. I have no problem getting into my liberal elite bag here because I would say this about anybody who has said the things that Mark Robinson has said. Mark Robinson is a black man. He is married to a black woman. I don't fucking care. Both of those people are disgraceful, embarrassing, and disgraceful. And the fact that Mark Robinson can make it to the top of the ticket actually exemplifies how little white Republicans think of black people. A willingness to have a Herschel Walker as a senatorial candidate or a Mark Robinson as a gubernatorial candidate. White people do not, they do not. White conservatives, they really think the absolute worst of black people. The horrible stuff. I mean, it's xenophobic, it's misogynistic, it is anti-black, it is hypocritical. A man talking about no government handouts when his wife's business is fully funded. I don't know if the business is still operable, but until recently, the wife's business that was keeping the family afloat for years was fully funded from state issued funds. That is also government handouts. Um, don't get me started. Don't get me Mark Rock. Truly, that is embarrassing. And as somebody who was raised by a very nerdy, brainy, read the books, Black Republican, uh, Booker T. Washington was the greatest man who ever lived, Black Republican. Like my father went to undergrad at Tuskegee, and then got got terminal degrees and was entrepreneurial in a way that I am entrepreneurial, and liked black people, had black friends, married black, had black children, but also wasn't fucking stupid. The idea that the black standard bearers for black Republicans are people who say dumb shit the way that it's so offensive. It's so crazy. Now, as I say all the time, me and my dad, I grew up, we used to tussle. The girls used to tussle. They would literally say, like, look at the let's pull up the data. Let's let's go to the text. Let's pull up the data. Let's look at this. Let's look at this. the statistical probability of that. Like, I grew up with that kind of, I don't know, the new age black Republicans uh, uh, is bad. It's real, real bad. So, anyways, I said all that to say that Kamala Harris energizing the black electorate in North Carolina, even if it doesn't result in Kamala Harris winning the state of North Carolina, hopefully it can aid in all of those down ballot races. It's really a mess. Yes, Mark Robinson is a Holocaust denier. Okay, so what are my concerns? I have a real economy concern. The first one, let us look at an article I read from the Wall Street Journal. The haves and have nots at the center of America's inflation fight. This was Wall Street Journal by David Uberti, July 30th, 2024. I found this to be a very fascinating article. And I'm sure you've seen other articles like that. Basically, it talks about how rising inflation is really, really bad for people at the low part of the income scale. It is forcing people who previously might have been able to live relatively comfortable lives. They are relying more and more on credit. And there was some, I'm sorry, I have to, because I write down everything I read. I have to make sure that I get this right. There was a quote in there. Let me look at it. Y'all talk amongst yourselves. Okay, some pull quotes from that article. So we'll do quote now delinquency rates for credit cards are higher than any point since the aftermath of the Great Recession in 2010, according to BCA research. The unemployment rate then was more than double its level now. There is something happening in this economy. There's something happening. And I think that the coastal elites and the middle of the country, comfortable liberals, there's something happening and we're not getting it because it's not enough to keep repeating the economy is good, the economy is good. And I keep hearing people say that. There is a TikTok influencer. Her name is Kyla. I think it's Kyla Scanlon. And she has called it a vibe session. And she has said repeatedly the fundamentals of the economy are good. Unemployment is low. The stock market is, even though the tech stocks have been a tumbling, is still 14% up 14% from the beginning of the year. But people in their pocketbooks, in their homes, the lower half of the income scale feels they feel overextended. They feel financially stressed. They are over relying on revolving debt. Whereas if you have investments or if you have savings, I mean, look, if you have any good bit of money in like a traditional savings account right now, you're doing great. Yeah, it's a great time to just like be a saver. But that does not that just doesn't apply to so much of the country and that trouble I I think that that is going to be a really difficult obstacle for Harris to surmount because even in that morning consult poll where she was in a statistical tie with Donald Trump in Georgia and 2 points ahead in Arizona and Nevada, in almost all of those economy questions, if you download the actual PDF, which I know nobody does, and like go through the crosstabs and all of that stuff, um, when people are asked the actual questions about the economy, which was one of their top concerns going into this election, they almost universally say that they trust Donald Trump more with addressing their economic concerns. Um, I know there's this a rumor or whatever, like Jerome Powell at the Federal Reserve might cut interest rates in September. That would be great. I mean, just this inflationary environment, like when people are talking about the economy is good despite inflation because the uh, the economists, the people who look at the data. And by the way, I'm not a data denier. I'm not trying to be a data denier. I understand, and I talk about this with people who do economics for a living, people who do markets and whatever, like the numbers people. And they are saying that wages have outpaced inflation. But why do but why is this happening then? Okay, so another quote from that article, because the Wall Street Journal, that paywall is something crazy. Okay. Quote, even as the economy powers ahead, some retailers are reporting slowing sales growth in a sign that some shoppers are trading down for cheaper items or pulling back entirely. Wage gains are moderating, while unemployment has inched upward in recent months from 50-year lows. Okay. The next quote that I pulled: on top of stock's artificial intelligence bonanza, Americans are earning investment income at a seasonally adjusted rate of $3.7 trillion annually, according to June Commerce Department data. That is 770 billion more than January 2020. Although Wall Street's recent pullback from tech has slammed stock prices, the S&P 500 remains 14% higher than the start of this year. Okay, my next pull quote: the proportion of cash offers on existing homes in June grew from 26% to 28% over the previous 12 months, even as nationwide prices notched records. American tourists are splurging on trips everywhere from domestic locales to southern Europe, pushing airlines to ramp up luxury offerings such as exclusive lounges. All right, and I don't want like people to misconstrue that quote. It is not saying that the people who are complaining about struggling and having to put everything on credit cards and they can't afford to buy groceries, those are not the people who are doing luxury travel. The people doing luxury travel are the people who have gained the most from a booming stock market. You know, the people at the top, and as I mentioned, I became a savings girly last year. Even a regular savings account is doing a lot. Even a regular savings account is doing 5%. That's like nothing. That's free money. It's free money. And so just these different things, and it's like it's luxury travel exploding, it's luxury commodities exploding, and then so much of the country saying eggs. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know how much eggs cost. Oh crap. I don't, and I'm afraid to say a number because it's gonna be off. Because I do not do my own grocery shopping. I don't know. Y'all put in the chat, how much do eggs cost? I don't know. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm exposed. Um yeah. There was also another. I get overwhelmed in grocery stores. That truly, it's, to me, it's not a fight. I can't. I have a disability. I have a disability. Okay. Um. The other thing was a story from New York. I think it was like a Brooklyn based. It was a Brooklyn based food bank, and they used to only have a few dozen people come in every week, and now it's 2,500 people who are coming to the food bank every week. So, anyways, um, yeah. So the last thing, at an annual rate, Americans in June were on pace for $531 billion in personal interest expenses in 2024. That's up 77% from 2 years earlier. I mean, I don't know. It's not doing great. So I do have a concern about the economy and how that will. I have a concern about the economy generally because it is wrong for people in the quote unquote strongest, richest nation in the world to be thinking about whether or not they can afford to buy groceries or feed their family. I think that that is morally reprehensible. I think that is wrong. Um, and then finally, I have a concern about what's going on in the Middle East. I thought we were on track for a ceasefire, and that would be great, of course, for the incumbent party. No, I don't think so. Especially after the Hezbollah attack. You know Netanyahu. He's gonna do what he does. I'm concerned. I think that escalations in the Middle East are bad, of course, for all of the people who actually live in the Middle East who are going to suffer. It's bad for the tens of thousands of people, especially those, the displaced Palestinians of the West Bank. Um, those people who have already been killed and the people who are in fear for their lives every day. But there are also electoral consequences. Again, in the polling, not just from the morning consult, but also elsewhere, people say that they trust Donald Trump more with regard to foreign policy than they would Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. So I don't know. Oh, but the other bright spot. The other bright spot is that in an extremely gender polarized election, women are much more likely to vote than men, and there are more women in the electorate than men. And the final thing is, I was talking to a liberal elite who works in politics the other day, and she was saying how, sorry, I just like the term liberal elite. I know it's supposed to be pejorative, but I just think it's so funny. Um, And she was saying that the polling is not accurately capturing how many Republican voters have died in the past 4 years. She was explaining to me that while generally the United States is split down the middle in their political orientation. There are millions of Republicans and Republican leaning voters who have been removed from the electorate because of COVID. And that makes her very confident as a Democratic voting liberal elite. That makes her very confident. And I'm just wondering, like, why have we not like seen people? I feel like we should be talking about that more, because when she explained it to me, that made a lot of sense. Like, I was like, you know what? That made a lot of sense. Because so many Trump voters, there are so many Trump voters who just died from COVID. Um, so I don't know. Look, I just tell y'all what the people tell me. I'm not a statistician. I'm not a political scientist. I just read a lot of books and put words together. That's all I can do. I'm really great at synthesizing information. That's me. At any rate, um yeah. Yeah, shout out to the Patreon girlies. And she was underscoring that the percentage of dead people, and by the way, it's not just boomers, it's like silent generation people. The reason why she believes it's significant, it's because of where they died, obviously. It's not just about the absolute number, but in places where restrictions and mandates were relaxed early or they never fully took effect, in places, and like she's like really like trying to like do the triangulating and data, and like that's like what she's working on now. Shout out to the scholars. um in places where the population over 70 is much, ooh, maybe I shouldn't be talking about this in public. Huh. That's why people don't want to tell me things. You know what? I should not be talking about somebody's ongoing research in public. Never mind. Never mind. Okay. Um, that is all I have to say about that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And I have some other thoughts, I have some concerns, but I will follow up with you guys later. Bye.